Hey everybody, Jim the Tabletop Engineer here, and welcome to a new episode. I am on sort of a sci-fi kick right now. I'll do probably 3 or 4 videos and then I'll go back to some fantasy stuff. But right now I am wanting to build some terrain for Star Breach, which is one of the science fiction games, skirmish war games that I play. So in this episode, this is actually sort of one of two. It's a standalone video, but I'm making some sci-fi containers for the next video, which will be a storage unit. So let's get to the tabletop, and I want to show you real quick how I made a whole bunch of sci-fi terrain containers, and they don't take long at all. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run part of the video in real time, not time-lapse, so that you can see exactly how long it takes to make one of the containers, not counting painting and adding little detail bits, but just the basic container. Let's get to the work table and take a look. To make a container, I took a piece of chipboard and I cut it at 5 inches by 8 inches. Now those dimensions are specifically for this particular shape of container. The way I came up with the dimensions of this container was I cut out the profile of it, like looking at it from the front. It's not quite rectangular, but it is rectangular with the edges cut off. So what I did was I created that in chipboard, and I used that to get the measurements of each of the sides. And what that turned out to be was the top and the bottom are 1 3/4, and all the remaining 6 sides are 3/4 of an inch. So using that information, what I was able to do was take that 5 by 8 inch piece of chipboard, and there's my template right there if you look carefully. I took it and I made marks every 3/4 of an inch, and then 1 3/4, and then another 3 3/4 inches, and a final 1 3/4. That equates to 8 sides. Now, I made the marks at the top of the chipboard, and then I made the marks at the bottom of the chipboard, but I didn't slice these into separate pieces. Instead, I used my blade to score the chipboard, which is basically you're trying to cut about halfway into the chipboard, and it takes practice. The first time you do it, you may not cut deep enough, or you may cut too far and put a hole, or actually slice the chipboard into 2 separate pieces. It takes practice. It also takes knowing the sharpness of your blade. A very sharp blade will cut through it in like 1 pass or 2 passes, whereas a duller blade you might be able to score it with 3 or 4 without cutting through. It's just one of those things that you sort of figure out as you make more and more stuff. So what I'm doing right here, if you take a close look, I'm just writing out the measurements so that you can see. It goes 1 3/4, and then 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, and then 1 3/4, and then 3/4, 3/4, 3/4. Those are the little slivers that I am going to cut, not cut all the way through. I'm just scoring. So right here, when I pass the blade 3 times, what that is, that's sufficient to cut the chipboard but not separate it into individual pieces. Now, after those score marks are made, you will fold them on those lines. And if you find that the fold isn't quite, if it's not easy enough to fold, you may need to go just a little bit deeper, maybe 1 more pass with your blade. And the idea is that you'll fold it up and make that shape. Using hot glue, you'll seal the edges, but when you seal the edges, this thing is still going to be flexible. So here I am bending it in all the different places. So there's 2 ways to address this, because you want it to stay in a shape that matches the template. So what I did was I took the template and I traced it onto a piece of chipboard, and I cut out another template. This piece is a piece that I will glue inside the container. What it will do is it will make it stronger, so that if you put your hand down on it accidentally, with not a lot of weight, it won't collapse. Now granted, you can collapse it if you put enough weight on it, but it's basically just to hold the shape. And the second feature is it's a guide. It allows you to glue it allows you to glue the wrapping of the container all the way around. So you can see here it fits. So I put a strip of glue on the top and bottom of the template, right there. And then I stuck it roughly in the middle. You don't have to be exact, but get it as close to the center as you can. And then I folded it over. And then this basically leaves a flap that's not attached to make it, a completely whole object. So again, I took hot glue and I ran a bead down that inner edge. Now this is going to be the bottom of the container, so there won't be any, if there's a mistake or a slight gap or the glue budges out, it won't be visible. This will be the bottom of the container. So press it together and just let that glue dry or cool for a few seconds. And then what you want to do is you want to apply a bead of glue around both ends of the container.
Each month, Bexham's Bizarre RPG and Wargaming magazine provides gamers with articles, props to print and cut out for players, mini adventures, new monsters, and much more. Look in the description below for details on how to get a few free issues so you can see what you're missing.
And in just a second, you'll see that I'm going to do this. I'm going to run a bead of glue all around that top edge there and the bottom edge. And I'm going to stick this to another piece of chipboard. So go all the way around and try to be consistent in the glue and not leave a gap. If you leave a gap, it's not a big deal, but it will reduce the rigidity or the strength of the container. So I pressed it down, and now I'm just using a pair of scissors to separate it. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on this side. I'm going to lay down a bead of glue all the way around, try to make sure it's one continuous bead, and then flip it down and push it onto the chipboard. And when this glue cools sufficiently, you can take a pair of scissors and you can just trim flush to the angled sides and the top and the bottom. And what you're doing is you're basically making the front and back of the container. And when you glue these on, they make the container even stronger. You now have it's not quite a box, but it is a container that is reinforced on the front and back and along one seam, and it has that center template piece glued in there for extra strength. So here I am just trimming the final end off. Now I've been showing you this video in real time with no edits. I could make one of these in less than 7 minutes. You can too. With practice, you could probably get it down to like 4 or 5 minutes. So once I made one, I went ahead and made 5 more. So I have a total of 6 of these containers, and I'll paint them all different colors and add details to them to make them look a little more realistic. Right now, they just look like a chipboard container box or empty box. So what I did to add details was I added strips of chipboard along the sides. I had these plastic bases that were very flat, and I just glued one onto the front of the container. I took a zip tie and trimmed off a piece of it and glued it on the top and bottom. And then the remaining part of that zip tie, I clipped the end off and glued it on like it's a handle. And then I just added some what they call granny grating or cross-stitch mesh and some extra pieces of chipboard just to make it look a little more, add a little more detail. Then for the angled sides, not the top, not the bottom, because I need these things to be a specific height. If you don't care, you can add things to the top for detail. But what I did was I just took chipboard and I just cut it in irregular shapes, rectangles, triangles, wedges, what have you, and I glued them on the 4 angled sides. Then I took the entire thing and painted it black. The other ones I'll paint different colors. Because it's chipboard, you can go ahead and paint it. You don't have to prime it with black and then paint it whatever. You can just paint it whatever color you need. Just give it a second coat if it's a bit thin. And then I took some silver paint and I just ran it down the edges of the various pieces of chipboard that I added for detail, just to make it look like the paint had come away and exposed raw metal underneath. And then with the brush, I just did a dry brushing on all of the sides just to beat it up a bit. Okay, so that is how I made 6 of these. I've got a bunch sitting over here, blue, green, white, gray. This one's black. I may do some additional detail work with some coloring, maybe of the handle or something like that. But the idea was to make these look very used and abused. There's a lot of dry brushing on them to give them, like the paint has come off. There's various ways you can do this. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this, mainly because the other piece has taken so much longer, the storage unit part. So I hope you like these. They're very sturdy, especially if you put the insert inside like I showed you. Yes, they're not rectangle, and yes, that's an ideal shape for transporting cargo. But you know, sci-fi world, let's take bevels and angle the sides and stuff, and let's give it this unique look. So anyway, hope you can make a whole bunch of these for your sci-fi table. In the next video, I'm going to show you how I'm going to stack these in an organized manner for the tabletop. All right, that's it for this video. Please let me remind you to go and join 2 different groups, the Tabletop Engineer Facebook page and the Tabletop Crafters Guild Facebook page. In both of those, we are sharing terrain that we make, asking questions, showing off, basically whatever we want to share with one another. The Tabletop Crafters Guild is over 35,000 members, and it is definitely the place to go if you have questions or want to share what you're making. So go check that out. And the last reminder is, if you like these videos, please hit the like button below. If you don't like it, hit the don't like it button. But I also would like to ask if you want to see more videos like this and you want to see them earlier than they hit the YouTube channel, you might want to consider becoming a patron. My patrons, you can become a patron for just $1 a month to support me. I try to keep it low, and it gives you access to live sessions, live crafting and discussion sessions. You get an advanced look at crafts like this one, and there's some other things that you can qualify for depending on how you want to support. So again, go to patreon.com/thetabletop-engineer for more information. All right, this is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.